Today, we're going to tell you about some really big changes, how we're going to take the Mac to a whole new level. From the very beginning, the Mac redefined the entire computer industry. The Mac has always been about innovation and boldly pushing things forward, embracing big changes to stay at the forefront of personal computing. The Mac has had three major transitions in its history: the move to PowerPC, the transition to Mac OS X, and the move to Intel. And now it's time for a huge leap forward for the Mac. Because today is the day we're announcing that the Mac is transitioning to our own Apple Silicon. When we make bold changes, it's for one simple yet powerful reason: so we can make much better products. When we look ahead, we envision some amazing new products, and transitioning to our own custom silicon is what will enable us to bring them to life.
Here's the deal. Apple Silicon, the M1 processor. It is now available in MacBook Air, Mac Mini, and MacBook Pro 13-inch. There are some disadvantages with this CPU, and it's not exactly what everyone had hoped it to be. And I'll explain why in this video. But before I get into the negatives, there are some things that are positive, something Intel wishes they had done. You see, for the longest time, CPUs have been shrinking in nanometer sizes, adding more transistors, just in general, getting better. The average size CPU is 10 nanometers. They went down from 15 nanometers a couple of years ago. And Apple has somehow managed to cram a 5 nanometer processor in their new Macs with the M Motion Core. Sorry, no, not M Motion Core, because that was already a thing, but the M1 processor, the Apple Silicon. What does this mean for the futures of CPUs? Well, it just means that Intel and AMD have been smoked with what they can do. Because a 10 nanometer processor, yeah, it's the standard, but imagine the capabilities of a 10 nanometer processor compared to a 5 nanometer processor. This is beyond what we had expected. No, this is not allowed for upgradability at the moment because that infrastructure just isn't there. So if Intel or AMD wanted to switch to 5 nanometer, they'd have a hell of a job trying to get PC and more people on the train. Do I think it was the right move to go to 5 nanometer? In a sense, it gave Intel and AMD a kick up the ass and them, hey buddy, get going. And in another sense, it's a bit before its time. You see, 5 nanometer processors are great, but there's nothing else like it on the market. Which means, whatever teething problems will come with 5 nanometer, Apple's going to experience first. Which means they might not be able to do everything they had hoped to do to start off with. I know what you're going to say, but you're an Apple sheep. Don't you want Apple to succeed? Yeah, I do. But there's more disadvantages that apply to the CPU. You see, it has Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 capabilities on this thing. USB 4 and Thunderbolt 4. That's unheard of. Just announced by Intel anyways. But it's only a dual channel of Thunderbolt 4, USB 4 capabilities. Unlike the 4 USB-C ports that were Thunderbolt 3 or USB 3 capable. These are 2 instead of 4. And I feel like there's a reason for this. And the reason behind them reducing the amount of powerful ports on this thing is simply because the silicon doesn't have enough bandwidth to support these processors. on the Northbridge side of the CPU, not Southbridge, but the Northbridge side, there just isn't enough lanes for this CPU to handle for these ports, because it has to handle RAM and ROM on this side of the CPU. Whereas on the Southbridge, you get more of your hard drives, solid state storage, all that. But on these high speed lanes, there isn't enough to support the Thunderbolt. Which means, like I said, we're going to be stuck with 2 Thunderbolt ports for the moment on these MacBooks. Of course, you can pick up an old Intel Mac, because Intel have been doing this for years. They know how to give enough bandwidth to support these more ports. But do I think all silicon from Apple will have this? No. When we get into the more pro machines, and I know MacBook Pro 13-inch, it's not really pro, is it though? It's more of a MacBook Air Plus. But what it does offer is the potential for an M2 processor to come in. Maybe in 16-inch MacBook Pro and iMacs, which will definitely have more bandwidth to support it. This could be a reason as to why we haven't gotten more bandwidth CPUs yet, more CPUs from Apple. It could be just they don't have enough bandwidth in their CPUs to support a better machine. Another disadvantage which I do see people talking about with the M1 processor is just we have a really power efficient CPU here, and the fact that we're getting power efficient CPU in a Mac Mini, CPU built for MacBooks and Mac Mini. Now great, it's great, unifying the lineup, 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, except for that one MacBook Air model that's 7 cores, but that's not... You'd expect something more powerful for a desktop grade machine, and something less powerful for a MacBook machine. But these are all yet to be seen. Maybe Apple has it tweaked slightly, The more powerful machine gets the more powerful version of the CPU, which sort of distorts the lineup more. So we really have to see what Apple's end goal here is. But until then, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Follow me on Twitter at CEO Regan, and we'll continue the conversation there. Hit the like button and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. Hit the dislike button if you dislike this and you love Apple Silicon and you didn't like what I had to say about the M1. And I'll catch you in the next one. I'm Connor. I'll see you next one.